Hey everybody, it is our February monthly office hours. Welcome everybody who is joining us here today for our monthly office hours. I don't have many questions that have been submitted, or really any questions that have really been submitted ahead of time here. So I'm looking forward to having plenty of time to just interact with anybody that's here, and I'll share a little bit about some stuff that I think that's coming, but it's nothing really groundbreaking or anything like that to really share. If anybody has a question, what I would suggest is to please go ahead and post it in the chat on the live stream. That way we'll have time. I'll see that they're coming, and I'll be able to answer any questions at the end. I do have some stuff that I could just fill up the time if we if we didn't have any questions to address. So don't worry about that. I'm very good at being able to just fill up the allotted time that we have available at absolute worst case. But I'd love to go through and fill up, address your questions and do something that I can actually provide some value to you. So before we get started here, let me just kind of run through a couple of our slides and just kind of share with you a little bit about what this is, who I am, so that you know what you're looking at. This is a monthly office hours that I do primarily for Microsoft 365 developers, or Microsoft 365 developers that are interested in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So that's going to be anything related to SharePoint, SharePoint Framework, Microsoft Teams, Copilot extensibility, SharePoint Embedded, and then related topics like Azure, SharePoint Embedded, React, you name it. My name is Andrew Connell. I am a 20-year plus year veteran of the Microsoft MVP program. So you can see some contact info about me here on the slide. Spend a lot of my time these days working on SharePoint Framework, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Teams apps, spending a lot more time recently in extending and customizing Microsoft 365 Copilot and the new Copilot chat as well. I've got a bunch of history though, like in the SharePoint ecosystem going back 20 years. The last 5-6 years, I've been spending a lot of time around Microsoft Teams. And like I said, doing a bunch more stuff around Microsoft 365 Copilot as well. I founded a training company back in 2017, about 7.5 years ago now, called Voitanos, and it's where you'll find a lot of content, articles, videos, webinars, courses all around working in developing solutions in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I'm really excited about some really big changes though that are coming with Voitanos. I hope that I'll be able to share a bunch of them next time we get together in March, if not, probably in April. I'm in the midst of let's just call it a V2 of Voitanos that I'm working on right now. It's rolling out in a matter of like 4 waves. The first wave was launched late last year when I did a rebranding, which doesn't seem like it's a big deal to people on the outside unless you go through it and then you're like, oh yeah, I've been through that. I know that's a lot of work. But really all that most people saw from that was kind of a new tagline. You saw a new logo. You can see the logo here on the slide with the blurry icon going to the filled in circle, ring, I mean. And a new font that was used throughout the entire site. Wave 2 and Wave 3 are actually in process right now. I'm really hoping to push Wave 2 out very, very soon. It is my, if I can have a top priority, a single top priority, that's it. I actually have a few top priorities, but it's coming, it's coming very, very soon. I'm happy to tell you it. I don't want to show it just yet because I'm still working on it. But it's a whole new website that's going to get relaunched. And everything is going to basically, the organization of the content is all still going to be the same. Articles, webinars, courses, you name it. All that stuff is still going to be there. All the same URLs. Nothing should break. And right now I've got, the design is done and I use a static site generator to generate this and to push things out. I'm just going through and taking the theme, the design and that was built for me with my designer. Like I said, that's finished. And I'm just implementing a theme using the static site generator that I have to build the site out. So yeah, it's a lot of work. There's let's see, there's about 14 different page designs or page types that are getting rolled out. Most of the hard ones are the ones I'm doing first, and I'm almost done with all of the really hard ones. Like the home page is done, the navigation is all done, the footer is all done, and the next two that I'm working on right now are the article and the webinar listing and individual pages. Once those are done, though, I expect things to go really, really fast because that's like the core of like the hardest stuff that's got to get implemented. It's a very mobile friendly site. It is. It's lighter weight. It's more engaging. I think the color. It's a much better design. It's a professionally done site. It's not something that I've designed myself. It's not something where I've taken other like templates and I've applied them to my theme. I hired a real designer to do this. I hired without a ton of direction. I was like, told him what I wanted the company to be or what the company was all about. So he's doing that. Hopefully that's going to be wave 2. That should launch as soon as I'm done. So I want to do it as fast. I've got a target. Don't want to share what that is. I don't want to publicly miss it. But I'm working my butt off to get this done. I'm getting very little sleep over it. Wave 3 will be a major change for the company. Not so much a visual change, but if you're a student of any of my classes, or you are in our community, you will absolutely see a massive change with the business. Not going to go into any more detail with that right now. You don't lose anything. Everybody who's a student will continue to get stuff, but that will also set me up for some really cool stuff that I can do in wave 4 down the road. I have I see a couple questions here. Let me just highlight these really quick before I move on too much in the slides here. In the chat, I see, so I'm going to try to get names right, but of course, the great thing with YouTube is that some of you aren't using your real names, and so well, you might not be, but you're using like handles. First one here, so first, Bill, welcome back. Chamonix, you said you have a question about reusing existing jQuery CSS code from a classic site to SharePoint modern site. If you're the one that I was talking to in Discord in the last 24 hours, awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you've got specific questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. Yours was one of the questions I was going to go run to if we didn't have any that were submitted. So because I felt like I addressed everything in our thread, but I'm sure you've got follow-up questions based on what I said. If you've got them, drop them here in the chat. And when we get to the Q&A section, I'm happy to jump into those. Jonas, I see your question about ES6 and SharePoint Framework. Unfortunately, zero timeline on that. Microsoft has said nothing about it. I'll talk a little bit about what we can expect coming soon with the SharePoint Framework. But beyond that, they haven't shared too much, or I can't share too much. That they haven't shared much publicly, so there's only so much I can talk about. Bill, I see your question about property pane and custom React or using React hooks. I'll come back to that. So I just don't acknowledge I got you on the list. And admin, you asked, do I provide a walkthrough of how to build AI agents for teams that connect to other applications like ServiceNow, PeopleSoft, databases, Splunk, and legal applications like iManage? So I'm going to talk about that in just kind of, yes, I do, but I do it as a paid workshop or as a one-time, like a course that you could buy. I will come back to that. My answer is yes, with caveats to your question. So let me come back to that. Okay. So I got all y'all's questions. Thank you very much for letting me know. And if you have additional ones, make sure to follow up. I will start going through those questions. The only one is for, I'll start with Bill, and then I'll also address admin. I think I'm going to address yours before we actually get to the Q&A section. And Chamonix, about your jQuery and CSS from a classic site. You want to migrate to a modern site using SharePoint Framework. I need more detail on what you're interested in, on exactly what you're talking about. I have some strong opinions on the thread we had, and if we have time, I'll definitely, we'll have time, but I'll definitely dive into that. So thank you very much, guys, for the questions so far. Let me explain how I organize these office hours for those of you who are new. Let's do this real quick. I like to focus on 3 main areas. The SharePoint framework, the way to customize and extend your SharePoint Online experience, both for SharePoint Online and if you want to customize Viva connections. It can be used also for customizing Microsoft Teams. I don't recommend it. Happy to dive into that if anybody has any questions about why I don't recommend it. But that's another thing. We'll talk about SharePoint framework stuff in a minute. As far as Microsoft Teams go, if you have a Teams development question, let me know. More than happy to address those. I've only got one thing to highlight there. Not a whole lot of, I don't have a lot to show or talk about today in terms of anything that's new there. There's one new thing that I've noticed with Teams. That's basically it for now. Same thing, Microsoft 365 Copilot. Nothing really new to talk about here. No real news around Microsoft 365 Copilot. We just went through Ignite. And then they just had the big announcement with Copilot Chat that I wrote a bunch about recently. Also published in my newsletter. Don't have a lot to really talk about with that today, though, unless anybody has questions. And then questions. So I want to do very, very quickly. I want to get through the stuff that I want to share, and then let's tackle your questions. So I'm going to start with SharePoint Framework State of the Union. Where are we today? The SharePoint Framework version 1.20, we are still, that was the most recent version that was released in the early part of the 4th quarter of 2024 or latter part of Q3. I forget which one when it was released. But nothing really new since then. So it's version 1.20, and the 2 or 3 big things that were in that release was that adaptive card extensions, the quick view part of an adaptive card extension, before we could only do adaptive cards for quick views. Now we can do HTML, which also implies we can use like React in a little pop-up. So if you're not familiar with that, the adaptive card extension, those are those little tiles that we can have on dashboard pages, both in SharePoint, but also in Viva Connections. It's the primary way we can extend Viva Connections. When you would select a card, you could open up like a little, it's called a quick view. So that main view, that main little tile is called the card view. And then the one when you click a button and it opens up something else, like if you wanted to dive in or drill into something, that would open up the quick view, which is like a bigger card outside of the one that's currently there. So usually just like, let me open this up, look at it, and then go back to the main dashboard. Now, when we open up that quick view, we're not just limited to an adaptive card, but we can also have an HTML element that we pass in there as well, where we can then add in anything we want. We also got a handful of new chart types with the data visualization option that we have in adaptive card extensions, the card view. Here, before we just had these line charts that you see, like right these 2 guys right here. We now have these other 2 types. One of them is a donut chart, so you can see what it looks like here. We have the bar chart, and then we also have the pie chart. So those are the 3 new ones that we got. They also made one big fix in the 1.19 release. They did an update that basically, it really screwed up Webpack, because if we had any errors in our build, Webpack was really silencing or swallowing those errors and only showing us this incredibly useful error here that just said error object. It's like, that doesn't help me at all. So they got that fixed. That's in 1.20. So if you were seeing that in 1.19 or 1.19.1, yeah, I think there was a .1. That got fixed in 1.20. And then they also made some changes to ESLint and some rules with ESLint that we're using in our projects, and some changes with some of the React-based templates that we had. I walk through a lot of that up here in this article on my site. If you go to voitanos.io/blog, you will find on the first page of results, you will find an article that talks about unboxing SPFx v 1.20. There's an article that goes into a lot of depth, and there is a link to a video on YouTube where I do the same thing in a video. So if you want to watch something instead of just reading it, you can do that. It's also, I think, is available on the on my podcast, the audio feed to the video to the YouTube video is also there. So what's coming next with the SharePoint framework? I can give you a little bit of a hint here. I don't want to share too much though, because I mean, everything you see here listed on the slide is what Microsoft has said they're focused on with 1.21. Now, with all of that being said, I'm aware of another thing that is coming because I'm writing the docs for it later this week. That's one. There's a second, it's related to flexible layouts, if you're familiar with that. The second thing, I'm aware of a second thing that's not listed here, but it's unclear if it's going to be in this release or the next release. I don't want to say what that second one is, because I'm not sure if that's a guaranteed thing, and I'm also not sure if that's like a public thing yet. So I want to be careful about what I say here. All of this other stuff, though, I'll be honest, I'll be surprised if really anything in here is actually going to come in 1.21. To be honest, this is what they've shared. I will be interested to see though when this gets released. My understanding is that we will probably see a beta for this in the next week or two. Usually what that means, you usually ship their releases on Tuesdays. So I would expect that maybe at some point around the middle of the day, Eastern time, so around 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific time, so that would be around noon, around 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, which is GMT -4 right now, is when we would see it. If we don't see it then I would expect it come the following week. So I don't want to talk too much about what's coming with this though, because it's still it's also a little confusing because I'm writing some of the docs for it. I still have yet to see some stuff that I need to write the docs for. So I'm like, come on. So we'll see. Okay, before we do the questions, there's a couple other things I do want to show and just kind of share with you about some new resources that I've made available to you, and also make like one or two little announcements here that I think would be that may be beneficial for some of you that might be interested in. So I want to start. Let me make sure that I've got this set up right. Let's go to. Let me jump over here and let me just double check real quick. Yeah. Okay. So let me jump over here. Let me show you something real quick. All right. So first of all, this week I kind of announced it today. I went to people who are already on the waiting list and let them know. Some people have already jumped on and registered. In the middle of April, I am starting my 5th cohort. So let me jump down here. You see the dates. In the middle of April, on Wednesday, April 16th, I'm starting the 5th cohort of my Microsoft Teams App Dev Accelerator program. It is an 8-week developer program to get you leveled up and help you become the indispensable expert at building Microsoft Teams app for your organization, your customers, and doing so, getting up to speed faster than using all the other resources that are out there and available to you. This accelerator program, it's basically it's a live program. We get together twice a week for 2 hours. One of the sessions is about is a teaching session, and then the other session is an office hour session where you can ask anything you want. The big benefit with this, and you can learn from this more on my site. So if you go to the site and you go to courses and then go to the Microsoft Teams section right here, and then scroll down, you will find this tile right here that talks about the program. This program, if you're interested to learn more, just shoot me an email at andrew@voitanos.io. You can go there, or if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of this page, you'll see there's a form here where you want to apply to join us. Or you can just go and click one of these buttons, these blue buttons, to reserve your seat right away. It's limited to 25 students. You can see here on the site a bunch of testimonials from people who have been through it. One of the people who is joining us today live, let me just see if his name is on here. I can't remember if he gave me, I think he gave me no, I didn't get one. Oh man, we know who you are. One of the people that is in the chat with us today, joining us today live, was in one of these accelerators. And he can chime in, or he or she can chime in and say what they think about it in the chat if they like. But the big thing with this, where is my what you get? Who is this for? And what do you get? Okay, so here. Let me just give you the value add for this, and then if you're interested, jump on board. Oh, let me finish what I was saying a minute ago. It's limited to 25 students. The normal price is $3,500, but for the first 15 students, it's an early bird registration, and you can save $1,000. It's $2,500. So I've had a few people already register for it already. So there are some early bird seats that are still available. You get 2 hours a week of instruction, learning about different topics related to Microsoft Teams, building personal apps, Teams apps, conversational bots, chat bots. Chat bots, not just with Bot Framework, but we focus now a lot more on using the Teams AI library, which turns into like working with creating custom engine agents, which sounds like a Copilot thing, and it kind of is. But really, bots have just kind of transitioned to calling themselves, Microsoft has transitioned them to just calling them chatbots with AI, and that's a custom engine agent. You don't have to have a Copilot license to do that. We are going to focus on how to do that. I am going to talk more about that in the accelerator. This time around, though, I've added in a entire topic and discussion around creating custom agents for Copilot, for Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Chat. We do so using both declarative agents and custom engine agents as well. So we do 2 of those a week, 2 hours of that every week for 8 weeks. So it's 16 hours of instruction. I give you optional homework with some instructor-led videos, totally optional. We get together again for 2 hours for office hours. So if you've got a question, you can ask your question. We can have a discussion. It's wide open. Anything about the class, anything around Microsoft 365 Dev, we can go into anything. That's 2 hours per week for 8 weeks. So now you're effectively getting 32 hours for a really good, like when you break it down to like an hourly rate, that's a really good value. But that's not all. You also get access to all of my upcoming Microsoft Teams developer courses, which I was hoping to have them out by now. But I have a new part of this whole new thing with Voitanos 2.0 is making it easier for me to create content and publish content much faster. So I've got 3 courses for Microsoft Teams that are more self-paced that are going to be coming out. You'll get access to all of those. This is a huge one. You get access to asynchronous coaching throughout the entire duration of the program. So what's cool about that is once you join, for the next 8 weeks, you can send a question in either via text by submitting it into the community that we all use for the class, or submitting it via a video question or an audio question. And my commitment to you is I will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours for the duration of the program, and happy to answer your question until we get it resolved. You can even use this for live classes if you like, right? Or for live projects that you're doing with customers. So we've done that in the past. If you're interested in this though, hit me up, let me know. If you're on my newsletter, the newsletter that just went out about 30 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago, has a call out in there where you can register and you can also reply to get more information. And I mean, maybe it's not for you, or maybe you're not sure if this is for you, if it's going to be the right fit. Let me know. Let's connect. Let's jump on a call. Let's have a discussion about it. All right. That's one thing I wanted to share with you. Let me pump that one for a second. Another thing I just wanted to make sure you're aware of, it's one more one more offer. This was to the person named admin. If you go to in the course on the site today, and you go to the Copilot courses, back in December, I ran a live workshop, about a 6-hour workshop over the course of 2 days, a virtual workshop, where over the course of 2 days, let me jump down to the schedule. Over the course of 2 days that you see here, we went through the entire process of creating declarative agents. So there was a little bit of what are these things? Why would I do this? Why do I care? What's involved? And then how do I build them? How do I add knowledge to my agent? How do I add instructions to my agent? And how do I scope it down? And thank you very much for that comment, Bill. Bill was one of the students. I appreciate you that I was referring to earlier for the Teams Accelerator. We also learn how to, and this is part to your question, admin. It also shows you how to add skills to your declarative agent to teach Copilot how to reach out to other systems in your organization via an API and to effectively implement the RAG pattern on the fly with prompts that users are asking. So I show you how to do it using a custom web service that we create, but in the workshop, I show you how to do it with how you can do it with any kind of a web service. And that would include services like PeopleSoft, ServiceNow, custom databases, Splunk, legal apps, you name it. I mean, I basically show you how to do that. It's how do you call the API? How do you get that data back? And then how can you also have that agent perform actions on that external thing, on that external service on your behalf? I show you how to do that stuff. So that is part of this workshop. Today it shows there is no date for the next one that's coming up. I can tell you there is one that's going to be coming up in March, and sometime later this week, I will announce it and send out links for where you can register for this as well for the live workshop for this. So that's coming. That's coming soon. Not right now, but it's coming soon. If you're on my newsletter, you will get an email that lets you know when they're available to register for this. But today it's not set up just yet. I ran out of time. Sorry. And trust me, there's not a lot of free time now. I've been up since 3:30, 3:45 a.m. my time, working on the new site. But at any rate, that is coming. If you're definitely interested in it, like admin, join the wait list, and you will definitely get an email that lets you know with an extra little discount that you can apply, have a chance to register early. Okay. The last thing I want to share with you, it's a bit of an announcement, and then we're going to do public questions here, is that if you go to the Learn section of our site and you go to Webinars, I have announced or published, however you want to say it, a bunch of webinars that are going to be coming up over the next few months. I've got one that's going to be in about a little under 10 days now, about 9 days away, for those of you who are new to the SharePoint framework. So Chimonix, this may be good for you when you were just asking about working with web parts and migrating existing solution over to SharePoint framework. This is very much an intro. What is the SharePoint framework? How do I get started? All of these webinars, 100% free. Admin, this thing right here about introduction to customizing Microsoft 365 with Copilot with agents. This is like the first part of my workshop that I'll be doing. This will be also before the workshop. So if you want to get a preview of kind of what's going on there, I will talk about it in that workshop as well. So you can register for that if you like as well today. I also have one that's coming up in early April on getting familiar with the tooling and getting started and really understanding how the tooling works for building Microsoft Teams apps. I do that in my accelerator, but that's something I'll be doing as well here at the beginning of April. This is not a mistake. These are the exact same webinar. It's just they're done on 2 times. This is basically what is Microsoft Teams app development, and would I be interested in doing this? I do it twice. Frankly, it's the week before I do I start the accelerator for Teams. So this is an opportunity for people to get a little more information at the last minute. And then finally, I've got one that is a session that I'm going to be doing at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference in Las Vegas in May. It's the first time I'm doing this session. So I want to have a trial run of it and I want to get some feedback. So I'm doing it as a webinar. It's SharePoint Framework tips and tricks and hidden gems of all the stuff that I've picked up over the last 7 years, almost 8 years of working with the SharePoint Framework. So this is one of the sessions I'm doing at the M365 Collaboration Conference. I'm also doing this at the TechCon 365 conference in Seattle in June. So interested in learning more about that? Join me. Anyway, those are all the webinars. Last bit, and then we're diving into the questions. Today's newsletter was about upgrades and versioning of SharePoint Framework projects. I have gotten a lot of questions about this recently, some really detailed questions. And like specifically, this picture was from when I was at the European SharePoint conference in last December of 2024 in Stockholm with Microsoft's Paolo Piercy and Peter Carlson, where we were getting questions about upgrades and stuff. I've had a bunch of questions about this recently in the Discord community, and I'm like in the middle of teaching my accelerator for the SharePoint framework, and my first cohort of that, and that was a big topic this week as well. So my article here kind of explains what my guidance is on how to go about doing it. The gist is, if you've got a very old project that you want to upgrade multiple versions from, like, say, an old like SharePoint Framework 1.12, and you want to jump up to modern 1.20, I don't recommend using the CLI. I don't recommend using that's the most common way of doing it today. I recommend instead, and that's what this article walks through, which is what my newsletter was about today. I recommend, and you won't get this article, you won't see this on the site unless you are subscribed to the newsletter. So the other way of getting it, actually, if you go to newsletter.voitanos.io and scroll down, you will see it right here. And if you click on it, if you subscribe to the newsletter, you can get the article today. It'll be available on my site for you to get to later this week. Right? It's first newsletter people get this stuff first. So newsletter's 100% free though. So you can sign up for it and you can unsubscribe anytime if you like. Okay, enough of all that stuff. Let's start diving into some questions here. So hide all that stuff. All right, so we are now we're doing the question section here. So what I want to do, I've got a couple questions. I always come over here in Discord. I just want to make sure you guys are aware of this. In Discord, for those of you who are my customers today, if you are an Ultimate Bundle subscriber of my SharePoint Framework course, you get access to this Discord channel of office hours where you can ask questions, and like your questions go right to the top of the list of what we're going to cover. Anthony and I were going back and forth this morning, a question that he had around Azure Functions. His question, unfortunately, he's like, can you talk about this in office hours? I'm like, I can, but that's the first time I've ever seen it. I have no idea what this is. So he's got a configuration issue. Unfortunately, I can't help with that today. So it's unfortunate. But let me go through and answer some of the other questions here that I have from you from some of you in the chat. So let's kind of work backwards a little bit here. So Jonas, you asked about ES6 in SharePoint Framework and when that's going to happen. Unfortunately, no idea. We are waiting for Microsoft to do a big refresh of the dependencies with the tool chain today. And right now it's just, we're stuck with ES5 because of a bunch of other dependencies they've done. They said that they were doing some stuff to clean this up and it was going to free them from having all of these other dependencies with other parts of Microsoft that are not on ES6 and they're still on ES5. Like we're stuck on ES5. And I've heard nothing about it since then. So unfortunately, I have no timeline for you. Every time I hear one from Microsoft at this point, it's not reliable. So I don't know when that's going to happen. So I'm sorry to give you, I'm the deliverer of the bad news, but right now I've got nothing for you. I've been complaining about that. I've been complaining about an update to Node. I've been complaining about the fact that React is 4 years old. The version that we're stuck using with the SharePoint framework for SharePoint Online is 4 years old now that version 19 is out, and we're still on we're still in 17 in the SharePoint framework. So a little challenging. So back to admin, when you asked about, do I give you a walkthrough on how to build AI agents for Teams that connect to other applications? And then you had another question that said, do I have a walkthrough for an AI agent crews as well as for Teams? So I guess the answer to that is part was that free webinar that I'm doing at the beginning of March. So you can register for that. It's not so much we're not going to cover how to build agents. It's more the value proposition, which to me, the message that when I'm talking to customers that's really resonating is, so you spent $30 per user per month on Microsoft 365 Copilot. Are you getting value out of it? And a lot of them are like, ChatGPT is a little bit better. And I don't disagree with you. I think ChatGPT is better. But the real value is when you can teach Copilot for Microsoft 365 Copilot, when you can create think like in the ChatGPT space, you can create private GPTs. It allows you to create like a private agent that is scoped to specific scenarios, and that's when you start to get real value out of this, out of Copilot. There are a couple different ways you can do that. You can do that using a custom engine agent or a declarative agent. A declarative agent, you're basically using Microsoft's infrastructure and their orchestrator that is going to go fetch data based on the knowledge you give it, based on the other services that you make it aware of, and then you can have like a customized Copilot experience inside of Teams or inside of office.com/chat. Or anywhere the biz chat experience is available to you, including Copilot chat. And I show you how to do that using the Teams toolkit. The other kind of agent you can create is a custom engine agent. And that is one where you're not using the Microsoft stack. You're essentially creating a chat bot infused with AI using the tools that Microsoft gives us. And for that, users don't need an extra license for Microsoft 365 Copilot. The webinar I'm going to do is that whole proposition of why you would want to do that and what tools are available to you. The second piece to that is the workshop that I'm going to do, the live workshop I'm going to do in March that I told you about, that I'm going to make it, I'll publish a way for people to register for it and announce the dates for it later this week. That shows you how to do one of those kind of agents, declarative agents. The third type of a custom engine agent, all I can say is stay tuned. I got plans for that one too. Those are really powerful though, but I am going to talk about both kinds of agents you create in my Teams Accelerator that starts in mid-April. So hopefully that gives you what you were looking for here. If not, feel free to follow up. Okay, so Chimonix, you had an additional question. I'm going to show his question that he had from this. Is this it? Yeah, I think this is it. So I'll let you guys just look at this question. Make it a little bigger, easier to read. So his question, I believe your name is, I hope you're the same person. If you are, I think this is Michael. So the big question that Michael has is, or I'll just say it because we're in YouTube, Chimonix, is, you're welcome, admin. Wish I knew what your name was. Is you have an application that is running in SharePoint that is built using Bootstrap for CSS, probably some custom CSS, jQuery, and you're implementing it using the content editor web part in a classic SharePoint site. I get the feeling too, based on some of the stuff you're saying here, is that you're customizing the new and edit form of a document library, and you're also customizing search. And the big question that he had was, so you want to migrate to SharePoint Framework on a modern site because Microsoft is going to ultimately stop supporting Classic, although they've been saying that for years. So I don't know when that's supposed to happen or even if the dates they provide are reliable. And you say that the new SharePoint application doesn't need additional features. It just works the same as is. Well, I understand that's the requirements there, but you're going to have to make some real changes to it because some of the stuff you're doing, you can't it's not going to work. So you say, if you start everything from scratch, it might take a lot of time to achieve the same results due to short staffing and lack of advanced SharePoint framework experience. On the other hand, it's a pity to put aside thousands of lines of code built over the years. So you had a bunch of specific questions here. So I want to be able to do large file uploads on classic sites. You can do that. You can do that using either the SharePoint REST API or using the Microsoft Graph. I would use the Microsoft Graph to upload the content because there is a thing inside of Microsoft, inside the Microsoft Graph API that allows you to do large file uploads where you are uploading chunks of a file and you could pause them and restart them as well. And so that's something, and if the files are over a certain size, like when you say it can take 4 gig files, you would want to use the reusable one that's available to us. It's not hard to use, but there's just some stuff that you're going to have to do. You say you want to be able to load JavaScript and CSS files. Yep. Now the way you're doing it, it's not going to be the same, but in the SharePoint framework, totally no problem at all. We can make that work. You say a full width form. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. And then you talk about like, you want to be able to do like, which parameter are you supposed to use, full page or full bleed and all that kind of stuff, all these things. And I kind of walk through some of the points here that you had in your question. So going back, I see you put some stuff here in the chat. So let me just read through that really quick. You said the current page is a content editor web part that links to a text file that loads all the CSS, all the JavaScript, CSS, and other libraries to render the page. So a lot of files are loaded. You're using jQuery. It looks like you're using the jQuery UI library that's deployed. You have some stuff deployed to the site assets library. Okay. So here's the thing. Let me just give you, I answered some of the questions in Discord, but let me answer some of this. And if somebody else has, I only see one other question that I haven't answered yet on Jonas, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Let me come back to your question in just a minute. So I want to make sure I leave time for Jonas, and if anybody else has a question, I want to make sure I have time to address those. But, so here's the thing. The way you're customizing the forms today with jQuery, CSS, and JavaScript in a classic site using the content editor web part. So using content web part, that's fine. But the way you're customizing the existing forms in these different libraries is completely unsupported in SharePoint Online, especially in a modern site. And what that means is when you're using jQuery, you're modifying the existing DOM, the existing HTML on the page, so the document object model, you're modifying the existing DOM to get the results that you want. But in doing so, you have to use like query selectors or using classes or IDs of the elements that are in the DOM for your stuff to work. Microsoft, this is called DOM manipulation. And Microsoft explicitly states that this is not supported in SharePoint Online. And the reason why is because they frequently update the code in SharePoint in a modern site. IDs change, classes change, HTML changes. And they do not tell us when they're making those kinds of changes. So if you're depending on pieces of the DOM for your solution to work, when you migrate to your SharePoint Online, or even if you might use the SharePoint framework to use all of your existing code to get that all working, at some point stuff is going to break. It's guaranteed to break, and you'll have no notice that it breaks. You'll just have to go in and be reactionary that whenever they make changes, you're going to have to go update your stuff. The whole point of the SharePoint framework was to take what you're doing today, which is using client-side development with tools like jQuery, CSS, and either the script editor web part or the content editor web part. The whole point of the SharePoint framework was to take that style of development and treat it as a first-class citizen. And and by doing so, there's a couple different points to how they do that. One is they create a contract, and they basically say, we're going to let you build extensions and web parts and some other stuff, and we're going to give you places on the page that you can add your HTML and make changes, and we won't break that. We won't make changes to those parts of the pages, and you'll be okay. If you go outside of that element that we've given you and you make changes elsewhere, kind of like what you're doing today in a classic site, we don't support that. That's DOM manipulation. We strongly encourage you not to do it. And you're basically at your own, it's like your mileage may vary. My personal opinion of it, if you know what you're doing and you write your code in a defensive way and you have good telemetry and monitoring to see when they make changes so you can proactively go fix those changes before your customers come back and complain about it, then you're kind of okay, as long as the changes are not like destructive or permanent. But it is what it is. Now, what I would do with what you've built is, if you want to use jQuery, you can still use jQuery. But the way you're doing things today, without ever seeing any of the code, just the way you've described it, you're going to have to change a couple things up. So first of all, you don't use, there is a way in the SharePoint framework to change or to basically create your own forms for a document library or a list. You can control the new form, the edit form, and the display form for a list. And that's done using what's called a SharePoint Framework extension, specifically a form customizer extension. I show you how to do that in my class, in my SharePoint Framework course. So that basically think of it like you create a web part and then you install it into a list. And SharePoint says, okay, I won't show the list. Instead, I'll just give you a div and you just put whatever you want inside that div. And if it's a new form, you present the form. And when you're done saving the data to the SharePoint list or document library, tell me when you're done and I'll redirect the user back to where they came from. If you want to edit or view an item, I will open up your form I will give you a div, and I will also tell you the ID of the item that that the user selected, so that you can go get that data using the SharePoint REST API or Microsoft Graph. You can populate the page with the data, and if it's an edit form, let the user make their changes, and when they click save, you write that data back to the SharePoint list or document library and tell SharePoint, hey, I'm done, and it will redirect the user back to the main page of the list. That is a better way of doing it. That is the supported way of doing it. That's how I would recommend doing it in a SharePoint Online site today and using the SharePoint framework. So does that mean you have to recreate your forms? Yes, it does. And recreate the logic that reads and writes the SharePoint REST API? Yes, it does. Can you still save files? Yep, you totally can. Can I do anything I want inside that form? Yep. Just think about it as like a giant web part that just fills up the entire page, except for the header across the top and the navigation on the left-hand side. That's how you would do that. Everything else about the application that's all running, it's going to feel like it's going to be a more reliable application, an easier application to deploy and package and deploy to your tenant, because it's not going to be to install your application. It's not going to be go take these files, upload them to the site assets library, go add a content editor, go to a page, put it in edit mode, drop a content editor web part on the page, go into the content editor web part, go add this, go into the source of the content editor web part, add all of this code, save your changes, and cross your fingers that nobody with edit rights or design rights on that page can go in and make edits and break the application. Doesn't work like that with the SharePoint framework. Instead, we're going to say, install this app on the site. Ta-da, your app is all installed and it's all working. You can do that as a web part. You can have custom forms for a list. You can have a full page app, which is essentially a single page app that takes up the entire body of the page except the header across the top and the navigation on the left-hand side. That is using the option that you mentioned in your question of SharePoint. I think it was called SharePoint Full Page App. It's basically, I want it to be a single page app, a SPA. If you want it to also work inside Microsoft Teams in the same place where it has in your manifest for the web part, where it says supported hosts, you have 4 options. The one I just mentioned, SharePoint Full Page App, and then the SharePoint web part. So do I want to take up the entire page, or do I want it to just also be a box with other web parts on the page? Or you can also add in a Teams personal app, which means it can be installed inside of Teams as a personal app. and or you can say a Teams tab, which means it can be a tab inside of a channel, which takes up the entire page. That whole full bleed thing, that only applies to the web part option to take over like an entire section, all right, to take up the entire width. So you have options. The SharePoint framework can do everything and can let you rebuild the application that you have. I understand the one part of your question where you said to be ashamed to take all that code that we've written and not be able to use it again. Here's the thing. You've basically got the spec. The hardest part of an application is not writing the application, it's defining the application of what it can and can't do. Apparently you've got one that's working. That means you've got your spec done. So you could basically just say, I want to do this in the SharePoint framework. So if I sat down with you and you showed me how the existing app works, I'd be like, here's what you're going to build. You're going to build a form customizer, and you're going to build a single page app. And that single page app is going to work inside of SharePoint Online. And you're also going to be able to use it inside of Teams. And whenever you want to deploy it, it's going to be build your project, create a package, give it to your admin. He uploads it and deploys it to the app catalog, either for a site or for the entire tenant. And you want to use it, you go to your site, say I want to add an app. You pick Michael's application or Tremonix's application. Ta-da, it's done. So I think that you could definitely go through and map everything that you're doing today. I think that you just want to look at it and say, I want to go through and make it a little bit more, I want to make it like friendly for a modern experience. I want to make it future-proof, I guess, as best you can. Other thing too, I throw out here just my other opinion on this. You say you're using like jQuery UI, you're using Bootstrap. I would use the Fluent UI React. I would use React, and I would use the Fluent UI React libraries. Because then your application is going to look and feel like the rest of SharePoint and Teams and Outlook and all the Office properties to be able to do that. So life is a whole lot easier that way. So again, you can keep asking questions in the Discord group. Hopefully that helped you, Michael. But I want to make sure I give some time to the other questions that have come in from people. So in the last few minutes we have. So hopefully that helped. Okay, I see a question here from Jonas. File sharing to external users in a SharePoint embedded application. How would I solve that? You don't want to invite a lot of guest users to the tenant. You don't have to. You don't have to. In fact, you don't. There is, you don't, when you have a SharePoint embedded application, users don't need a license to use it, to get access to the data. They don't need a Microsoft 365 license for SharePoint Online. Cool. Tremonix is Michael. That's good. I was making a lot of assumptions there, but I thought we were pretty close. So Jonas, there's a couple different things you can do. So you probably want to have like an authentication model for your application. And you don't need to have the users authenticate with your tenant if you don't want that. Now you can, as like external users, you can, but you don't have to. So this is a lot to kind of try and cover just in just explaining it, but it might give you some points to kind of look down. So when you create a tenant, when you create an intra ID tenant, there are two different types of tenants. So when you, in Microsoft 365, the way most of us are familiar with intra ID is that when we create a tenant, or like we go to Microsoft 365 and we create a new Microsoft 365 tenant, that is going to create an intra ID tenant as well, because that's what's going to store all the users and groups and custom applications for that Microsoft 365 tenant. That is what's called a workspace tenant. It is a type of a tenant called workspace. Now, you can build a SharePoint embedded app that is tied to that app. Totally fine, nothing wrong with that at all, totally supported. But what if I want to go through and have a way for customers to be able to get access to the SharePoint embedded application? So what you can do is you can create another kind of a tenant, not 365 tenant, an intra ID tenant. You can create another tenant where you store your customers and all of your users in an intra ID tenant. And that type of a tenant is called an external tenant. So go look at the intra ID docs, and let's see if I can just pull up something really quick in Google with this. So intra ID external tenant. Yep, there we go. I'm going to drop this in the chat for you. So at Jonas. All right, so just at mentioned you, Jonas, with that. So effectively what this does is it allows you to create a way, it allows you to collaborate with customers and with business guests. Once they are authenticated, you still in your web application that would be using either this tenant or it would be using your customer tenant, so which could be your employees and the people who actually work for your company as part of your 365 environment. The code base that you use, once they're authenticated and you know who they are, the code base for your application is then you get to define like what people have access to. Okay, so you get to define what people have access to, but you also are going to be able to display the content from the SharePoint embedded application to users from either one of those tenants, however you see fit. What's cool about this is that now these users that are in the external intra ID tenant that are using your SharePoint embedded application, and it's still like your code base could still be authenticating using the like application permissions against your SharePoint embedded application that's defined inside your M365 tenant where the content in the SharePoint embedded partition resides. Your web code base could still be authenticating on the back end and getting the data back from those containers from SharePoint embedded and showing that to users who are currently logged in using the intra ID, the external intra ID tenant. Those external users, or those intra ID external tenant users, they don't need any kind of a license to access any of that content. And also, what's also nice about this is that you're no longer putting your customers inside of your corporate intra ID tenant and having all these guest users that people might accidentally be getting access to stuff that they shouldn't be, right? And not giving extra permissions to stuff. The only limitation or downside to this is that all of the features that you have in Microsoft 365 that your licensed users have access to, like Copilot, Purview, any of the e-discovery stuff, records management, search, all of the features that you have, all of the entitlements you have with your Microsoft 365 licenses for your customers, those external users, they don't have that because they don't have those licenses, right? So they're just going to be able to get access to the content itself, to be able to access the content from those embedded containers. I've worked with a client about this with this before, and where they wanted customers to be able to like submit content to the company for things for review. Like we did it it was a legal organization, and they wanted to be able to have a way for their clients to be able to upload content to things that were that the other lawyers had access to that were on that case. All of the content was stored in their 365 tenant and subject to all of the compliance boundary and stuff that they had with that tenant. But external users were able to log in, and they had a list of those users that were like tied to this one case, which meant that they could access content inside of that container. And they would show that through the web app, but they didn't get all the same features that all the lawyers did who worked for the company. So that's just kind of pointing you like, go check this out. That might be what you're looking for. I think those external IDs, those external tenants are really good use case for SharePoint embedded. So I'll let you, that link that's in the chat points you to the section in Intra ID and the Intra ID docs that kind of walks you through it. So it has nothing to do with SharePoint embedded, but it may help with that. The last thing that I run through, sorry, I see Chomox, I saw you another question, but we're running out of time. I don't want to leave admin. That last question you said, do I also have a walkthrough for Office Outlook ribbons using Visto as well? Nope, I don't. I used to do a bunch of stuff with Office add-ins and Outlook add-ins. I did a lot of work for Microsoft and did a bunch of training material on it. I can point you to that material, but me personally, I don't have anything on Office add-ins and customizing the ribbon. With that being said, I do have some stuff that I've done for Microsoft that might be useful. And if you're interested, I can pull links to that. If you can here's what I would do, because I'm probably going to run out of time with this. Go to on my site. So you can do this either in YouTube or you can do this on my site. So if you go to webinars, you're going to find this webinar right here. And at the bottom of the webinar, there's a spot for comments. Ask that same question, drop it in the comments, and I can follow up with a bunch of links to stuff that I've done for like Microsoft Learning Materials that they had hired me to create a while back. They hired me to create all the self-paced learning material for what's now gone, retired, but the Microsoft 365 developer certification exam. So I created a bunch of that content. You'll also find a lot of it if you go to my YouTube channel. So if you go to my bottom of the site and go to YouTube, and if you do a search for Office add-ins, there we go. This thing right here about start learning Office add-in development, free resources. I had an entire exam prep class that I used to sell for the MS600 exam. Microsoft canceled the exam. They no longer did the certification anymore. So I was like, all right, can't sell the class anymore. So I just took all the content for the Office add-in section, made one big video, and published it as how big is that? As an hour and 30-minute video. So you can go see that on there. So I just point to those same resources that I said I could give you. So you can get that from the YouTube channel as well. All right. Sabi, thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate it. Chimonix, I see you got more questions here. Let me do these really fast, and then I'm going to definitely cut it at 5 minutes past. I got to be respectful of people's time. You say you allow file sharing with external users through enabling domain sharing and item level permissions on each item to secure content. Careful with that. That is I missed your question with a post in Discord. You posted something in Discord, Bill? Hold on. Because if you did it, I don't see your question, Bill. Wait, did you have some question here? Oh, I did miss your question. Sorry, let me jump back to Bill. I apologize, Bill. You asked, can property pane custom controls be written with React hooks? Yes, they can. The one that I have in the class is done with just regular React, like classes, but when it comes to a React application, it doesn't care if it's a class component or a functional component. So class component is the traditional way of doing it. React hooks is technically functional components. When you consume a component, a React component, React doesn't care how you built it. It doesn't care if it's a functional component or a class component. So yes, you can do that as a functional component. My class doesn't show it, but you absolutely can. You absolutely can. I'm so sorry. I totally missed your question. Thank you very much for doing that, for reminding me of that. So Chimonix or Michael, you said, let me go back to that. Your question really quick. You say external sharing and then item level permissions. Just be careful, because when you break permissions, when you break permission inheritance, that is a huge performance issue. It's not impossible. It's not like, if you do it just for a couple items, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have a document library with a lot of files in it and everything has unique permissions, it's going to be very slow. And the reason why, you'll see the exact same thing on Windows. If you go on Windows and have a folder with 500 files in it, and you go to the permissions on each file and you change the permission structure, and then go out of the folder in Windows Explorer and then come right back in, watch how much longer it takes for it to load. It's because it has to go through a lot of permutations to figure out what does this user have access to. Same problem that you're going to have in SharePoint when you break permissions like that. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing that you're doing it. I don't know how much you're doing it, but if you're doing it a lot, or your application is going to scale to have a lot of people, item level permissions is a dangerous thing. It could turn into being a bad thing. Okay. Yeah, Bill, you want to use two components. You could use class and you can mix and match as much as you like. React does not care. It's actually one of the nicest things about for migrating a React application from class components to functional components is that you can do it one by one. Starting at the lowest level, I'd start taking the lowest level of your component tree and replace that class component with a functional component. Test it, everything still work, cool. And then just keep working your way until you've just strangled the entire application into React hooks instead of class components. So it's really nice that way. React doesn't care. The initial component is a class component that's going to call a functional. That works too. Totally works. In fact, I think in the class, I migrate an existing app on how to do that. And I show you in my React chapter, I think I actually show you how to do that. I don't know if I start from scratch. Either way. Awesome. Hey, a lot of great questions, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this was useful to everyone. If it was, please give me a like on the office hours. If you're not subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate if you do that. That actually, oh, look at I see the viewer count starting to go down when I say this. Those things actually make a difference. It helps me reach more people like you who also have some good stuff to share. So I'd really appreciate it as kind of like the cost of doing the office hours. And I'll also tell you, oh my goodness, I just saw your comment, Michael. You have thousands of items that use item level permissions as a constant share with authorized persons only. That's going to be a performance issue. And if you're not having it today, it's going to ultimately start to crawl to give you a lot of challenges with that. Item level. This has been a known thing for years that item level permissions are a performance drag. Okay, so I'm doing office hours again in March. The next time we're doing our office hours, where are my slides? Let me get my slides. There we go. So thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. The next time doing office hours is going to be 1 week earlier than normal because my kids are on spring break, and the fact that one's in high school, one's in college, and they have the same spring break. We're doing a family vacation. So I'm going to be gone when I normally do this, which is the third Tuesday of the month. And we're going to do it on the second Tuesday, which is March 11th. I hope to see you there. So with that, everyone, thank you very much for joining us. The YouTube live stream for the March office hours has already been created, so you can go click the little notification bell on it. And I've already set up the reminder email to go out a week before office hours to let you know that it's happening. I forgot to do it this time. I said in Discord that somehow it didn't go out. After I sent that, I looked at it this morning. Oh, it didn't go out because I didn't create it. I missed that step in my checklist. All good. Hey, everyone, have a fantastic rest of your week, rest of your day, rest of your week. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really hoping to get this office hours to be many, many more people. Keep an eye on some of the stuff that, keep an eye on my newsletter. I got a lot of big updates coming for you later this year. And if you're a Microsoft 365 developer, it's going to be some good stuff, some free stuff, some new offers that I've got for you. I got a bunch of other webinars that I'm planning on doing. I would love to know what you're interested in. Go send me a message on any of the socials and let me know. I'd love to hear it. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I'm going to call it. Bye, everybody.